Hello. Today marks the 2-year anniversary of my father's passage, death, or, as we say around here, birth into eternal life. He died in the emergency room. I was in attendance. My mother, my sister, and my oldest brother were also in attendance. And my older and younger brothers, as well as their family, were also here visiting for the holidays. In some respects, it was a perfect farewell. Everybody came together for the holidays, yes, Christmas, and it's a somewhat rare occasion since all the children are all over the United States. Some of us are even international, but all of the 5 kids were here with their families. So grandchildren, and in one case, a great-grandchild. Today, I was thinking about what I would do to commemorate the 2-year anniversary of my father's birth into eternal life. And I thought maybe I would make a video and talk about it. Something special about reflecting on my father. And the first thing that comes up for me is actually a quote by the Indian mystic Ramana Maharshi. It goes something like this: the world is illusion. Brahman alone is real. Brahman is the world. That's an extremely remarkable statement. And you have to kind of go at it one sentence at a time. The world is illusion. What does that mean? Essentially, it means that we represent the world with our minds, and our representations, otherwise known as thoughts, can dissolve, and there's simply being. And that being is Brahman. So when we say the world is illusion, it means that everything that represents the world, including this very statement, just dissolves, disappears. It's transient and impermanent. And what we have when these thoughts dissolve, when all these separate forms dissolve, we just have being, or consciousness. We could even call it just awareness, with a capital A. Now some esoteric spiritual metaphysicians will draw little lines and demarcations between those categories, and that's fine, but I'm not going to do that here. That's the world is illusion. Brahman alone is real. Another statement that Ramana Maharshi said, which is so profound, says, if it doesn't exist in deep sleep, it's not real. Well, nothing exists in deep sleep except consciousness itself. Again, being, awareness, and that ever-present luminosity of I am. That's the second sentence. The third sentence is, Brahman is the world. And that's the summum bonum of non-duality, where all the thoughts and representations and flavors of being are being. Brahman is the world. So God is all of creation, to put it in Judeo-Christian terms. The reason I'm reflecting upon Ramana Maharshi on the 2-year anniversary of my father's death is that I come face to face and heart to heart with the question of grieving. So it's customary to get sad when we reminisce about someone who's passed. And we think about how we wish they were here, or maybe we have regrets, guilt. But really, I have none of that. Because the world is illusion. I know, that's horrible to say, right? I'm like a spiritual prick for saying that. I'm an ascended master who is just dissociated from my whole realm of emotions. But the truth is, I don't have any negative emotions. I don't have any painful emotions. I don't have any suffering. The only really thought I have is that I don't have those things. And if I want to visit grief, if I want to visit regret, if I want to visit guilt, I could, but it would be an artifice. It would be a contrivance, because they don't naturally arise. Now I could go dig deep with the speculation that I have some shadow to pull up there. I'm quite ready and willing and able for that to happen, but it doesn't. What happens instead is a twist, where I consciously embody or move into those thoughts and live them because I can, not because I must. But to do so is a way to honor him. But what am I honoring, really? It's just one set of perspectives honoring another set of perspectives. This set of perspectives over here is all the memories of my father. And this set of perspectives over here is the thing, this Mark Benet, that feels like it should honor all of that. But that's all just here, right? This aggregate of perspectives called Mark Benet, and this aggregate of perspectives called my father, and all the memories, all of those are here. And all of them. So why would I revisit these thoughts, these recollections, these reminiscences, memories? Good, bad, painful, happy. What could I get out of it? Such a strange question. Would I need to get anything out of anything? That's another great question. What if the greatest thing that we could do individually is to experience whatever arises fully? What does that mean? What does it mean to experience this thought fully? How do you experience a thought fully? Well, actually, a thought is already an experience, right? This notion that you're somehow going to experience something fully is quite curious. Does this thought of Mark experience this thought of his father fully? No. To experience something fully, it's Brahman is the world, right? So that there is no separation between this thought and God, and consciousness itself. Every thought is a flavor of consciousness, as consciousness. The world is a flavor of Brahman as Brahman. I don't miss my father. My father was an abusive person. Psychologically abusive. Not physically, although he could spank the shit out of us when we were younger. But he had an excellent intellect that he used to somewhat terrorize people, so that they would be destabilized, and their frantic, agitated, irritated energy would go in his direction, and like a vampire, he would suck it up. Energetic vampire. Energetic vampirism. I learned how not to be by going 180 degrees in the opposite direction of his example in many ways. And if I'm going to honor him, I'm going to speak the truth. Right? I'm going to announce the negative. And I'm going to be intimate with the negative. Because in the act of being intimate with negativity, that is something very positive. Right? Because you're not running away, you're not being evasive. You're actually being loving toward that which is really needing love. Right? If I have all these negative, painful thoughts that are now coming up, I've become so attentive that that act of attention, that act of listening is love, is intimacy. So yeah, my dad could be a real abusive asshole. And I'm loving that memory now because I'm so fucking intimate with it. And because I'm so intimate with that memory of an asshole, I can now move through that memory into something more positive. Right? Because there's something about me that does want to recollect him in a more positive vein. But I can't do that unless I'm totally honest. If I'm false, and if I only give him praise, I'm being inauthentic, and I actually don't feel the deepest positivity that I can. If I'm honest, and I touch the negativity, then I can feel good. So I'll speak about how positive my father was in my life. He was an intellectual, and he was constantly grappling with the nature of reality. Whether it be something small and technical or large and metaphysical and cosmic, he was always crunching with his mind. He was also very full of life and very, very funny, but not funny in a typical way. Funny in the sense that he was trying to be funny and he wasn't funny, and that was funny. So he's telling a lot of puns. Puns 1.0. I'm like puns 2.0 because I had him as my model. And so he also had tremendous will, volition, power, intellect and power. I get my heart from my mom. And so he was someone who was in love with life. He's also very fundamentalist. Very fundamentalist Catholic. I also learned from that. I got a crash course in fundamentalism my whole life. And when I say fundamentalism, I mean that simply Catholicism was right, everything else was wrong. Every religion has this predicament. It's right, everybody else is wrong. And of course, when push comes to shove, each of those religions will say, well, yeah, those other religions, they have aspects of truth, but they are not the truth. We're the truth. Well, he was really big into that. And that's quite a riddle for me, because being aware of the fundamentalist orientation, I have to be very careful myself as a thinker, as a feeler. But toward the end of his life, he started to come around to perspectives that were outside of Catholicism proper, such as non-duality. And one of our last intellectual conversations, he asked me about non-duality. And that's my thing. So while people are out there getting PhDs in philosophy or JDs in law or MBAs in business or whatever, I was doing my non-duality PhD on my meditation cushion. We had a conversation toward the end of his life about non-duality. He was really passionate and curious about it. Like, what is this? He heard about it in the Enneagram. And he was, of course, understanding it theoretically, intellectually, and wanting me to help tease apart the concept of non-duality, which I did for him. But I also emphasized that it's a realization, that it's not simply a system of thinking that is enough. I mean, it's enough if you just want to keep an academic orientation, but it's also a way of being. And that non-duality is Brahman, is the world. So I think the way that I honor my father is a little meta. I'm not someone who's just gonna go down a black hole of grief. I just don't do that. That's not what I am. I don't have guilt, I don't have remorse, I don't have regret. What I do have is a knowledge of how people feel on the anniversaries of the death of a loved one. I know what they typically do, and I know what I think I should do, and what may even be expected of me, and I honor all of it, because Brahman is the world. And so, the way that I'm honoring my father today is being intimate with all the things that surround me on this day. Other people's feelings, other people's expectations, other people's notions of should or should not, my own absence of grief, and all of that. There's some kind of unreconciled things, but they're minor, they're small. And it's only because I was being authentic in the moment, and I couldn't make the concession that he wanted, and so I couldn't act the way that he wanted. He wanted to know whether I wanted to be buried in the same graveyard, in the similar setup. And he's now buried in a columbarium as ashes. And at the time, 4 or 5 years ago, I couldn't answer him because I was thinking to myself, so you've been so abusive to me my whole life, and you want to know if I want to have my grave next to yours when I'm dead. And I couldn't give him the honest answer, which would have been, no, I don't want to be buried next to you. Right? Maybe that will change as I grow older and approach death. So that might be a little bit of a regret there, that there was this deep silence and I just didn't answer the question. Now, I did something that was quite different from my other siblings. In my mid-30s, I stopped talking to my dad for 2 years because he had been abusive. I mean, a fucking full-grown adult at that time. And I began to understand what it means to walk away from an abusive relationship, which every human being should understand to some extent. Because we all know someone who's been abusive. And we all have probably felt inextricably bound to that person, caught in a web. What I understood after many years is that if you continue to walk side by side with someone along a sidewalk, and they periodically, let's say every block, whack you really hard on the shoulder, and you say, wow, ow, stop. They may stop for a block, but then the next block, on the shoulder again. And you're like, please, would you stop? I asked you a block ago to stop. And they're like, okay, I'll stop. Sorry. And you keep on walking. And the next block, whack. Same situation. You tell them, they say they're sorry, you keep walking, next block, and you do this for years. You may walk thousands of miles of sidewalk together. Every block you get punched, every block you say don't, every block they say I'm sorry, and they just keep doing it. Unless you get off the sidewalk altogether, they will continue to punch you. You have to leave the sidewalk. Because what you're saying is that if you continue to walk with them, they're understanding on a subconscious level that you're giving them permission to punch them. Right? That's their understanding. Well, they're still on the sidewalk with me, punch. Yeah, they're still here, punch. To continue walking is to give implicit permission for the abuser to punch you. So you actually have to get off the sidewalk altogether. And you have to decide when it's right for you to get back on the sidewalk, if it's right for you to get back on the sidewalk at all. So I think that's the best way for me to honor my father today. Some of you may think that is a really warped sense of honoring my father. I understand. It does feel warped. To me too. It really does. And all I can say to you is it's just the most true thing for me. It's the truest thing I can say. Because to extrapolate outward and to take a macrocosmic analysis of the world, we live in an extremely abusive world. An extremely psychotic world. And if you do not see that, you have got your head in the ground like that proverbial ostrich. So what I think my sensitivity required of me with respect to my father's is what it requires of me with respect to the world. I have to step off the sidewalk. Because I do not consent to being abused in a hyper-psychotic world. We are profoundly sensitive organisms. Capital S sensitivity. Profoundly sensitive organisms. And the way that we register the abuse around us and the psychosis around us is how we fucking rock. Do you understand that? How you sense everything is how you fucking rock.